Hi there, and welcome to the Builder's Office podcast, the podcast for homeowners who really want their building project to succeed. Welcome to episode 6. My name is Hugh. If you are in the eastern states of Australia right now, you're going to be experiencing unprecedented amount of rainfall that we've been experiencing over all of 2022. Where are we at the moment? We're at the 28th of October in 2022. So we have seen an extraordinary amount of rainfall. So when it comes to this, what we're looking at to start off with is what effects do rain/inclement weather have on building your home? So we've all experienced some sort of building in our home and some sort of work being done. So let's get into this. You'll see terms in contracts for building, whether you have built with a builder or not. There's things in there stating for inclement weather. Now, inclement weather can mean anything from too hot a day, which is a really fun one. If it's too hot, you get a lot of people that say, no, it's too hot to work, we're not going to be out in it. People disappear, depending on whether you're in the northern states or if you're down in the southern states. Different conditions, different inclement weather. So anything can happen in northern states, rain, torrential rain, then who knows, you could even end up with a cyclone. So all these sorts of things can happen, and what are you meant to do? Down here in Victoria right now, we've had quite a lot of rain, and how that's going to affect building a home, from whether it is just the rain stopping people from being able to get on site. If you're in the early stages and groundworks are being done, you can end up with a few problems with inclement weather from that. Rain, I know on a couple of projects right now, we've got a few issues with rain affecting and hampering projects from the extent that we've got so much water on site that we can't actually get any machines in to be digging footings and that sort of thing. So we're getting some delays that are coming in from that. We don't even have to start going back to the COVID delays or anything right now. It just is what's happening. So this is one area that can affect building your home. So sometimes we've got to think about this now. I have already talked about the effects of flooding. We can end up with significant amount of flooding that can happen just from rainfall on sites. So we've got to factor in some of those. And yes, that can cause a little bit of a delay. So we've got to think about all things like that. Could it delay more than just the time period to build? Or could there be an issue with supply? Sure, there can, because we've seen up in New South Wales, when the floods came through there earlier in the year, we had an issue with supply because some of the suppliers actually got flooded out. And they got flooded out, they lost all their stock. We were sitting on a particular project for the better part of 6 weeks, waiting on doors, which doesn't make life easy. We do, as builders, I know we do try to factor in some of that thing. So we do our best to try and mitigate those issues. We try to plan ahead, but we can't plan ahead for a flood. Sometimes you just got to be a little bit careful and really respectful to Mother Nature. Really got to take a lot of that into account when we're doing our builds and how we're factoring in time period for all of this. So definitely think about these sorts of things when you're discussing this, and keep it in your mind, watching the weather patterns that are going on around you. So it's not just going to affect your time period with the build, there can be things on supply as well. Another thing that can come into it when it does come to inclement weather, and I do get asked this one quite a lot, and we're starting to see more of it right now with projects that have stalled, or the builder has possibly gone under, and projects have sat quite a substantial amount of time. The question has always been, how does the material stand up against the elements during constructions, namely floor sheets? Now, floor sheets, if we know anything about floor sheeting that does go into double-story homes or on subfloors, what actually happens is during construction, the flooring will get laid, and it could sit there for, generally before the roof gets put on, it might sit there for maybe a month. When it does come to floor sheets that go into homes, they are designed with a wax material over the top of it so that it can last a certain amount of time out in the weather with rain going on it and that sort of thing. Now, if it's submerged, different story. Flooding and that sort of thing that can happen. Flooding can cause the material to actually swell so much that it can ultimately fail. I have seen that happen before, where the flooring has stayed submerged for a significant amount of time and the material softens that much that it does fail. So that is one area that it can actually end up being an issue. Now, where that falls back to afterwards, depending on the situation, it can go either way. While the best practice is to make sure that we get all the materials covered up as best as possible so they do the longest life out of the material, sometimes Mother Nature has another idea. So yeah, it can be quite challenging. It doesn't mean that it's always going to work. Doesn't mean that it's always going to be perfect. So we've got to really take a lot of that when it comes into the rain, inclement weather, how it's going to affect everything. Another thing that's happening a lot lately is mold, and the extent of how much damage can come from mold from water, and whether it is flooding or just a heavy rainfall event. Many times before, I've seen the issue of mold. Namely, it was multi-unit developments and the type of construction that was actually used for those multi-unit developments, where they had plasterboard as separating walls between units. Now, I'm not about to turn around and say that it's the best practice. It's cost effective for multi-unit developments. It does have the limitation that when it does get wet, like all plasterboard, it gets moldy. And I've seen it happen a number of times where standing water has stayed around on a project and the mold just grew. What can you do? You can't do anything about that side from mitigate it afterwards. Sometimes it doesn't always work out. And I've seen it where it hasn't worked out and mold has just kept on growing exponentially, which it does, and it's gone into just about everything inside the house. So mold is one of those things where it doesn't just stop at plasterboard. It does get into timber, it can eat timber quite quickly, and that's when you end up with issues with timber rotting. If you ever see timber that does start to rot and it's not just eaten by termites, then it does start to go pretty bad pretty quick. It does fail, so you have to be really quick, and during construction definitely want to be on top of that and just making sure that you're chasing around the builder, or if you're doing it own a builder, then chasing yourself around, just making sure that those issues aren't staying around and the place is getting dry. If you can get a roof on the house as quickly as possible, all the better. Now, right now, with floods going through, we're seeing a lot of houses that are not in the areas that would be considered to be normal places for flooding, and they are getting their subfloors or slabs getting underwater and can create a little bit of undermining that can happen with slabs as well. So that's another one. Probably discuss that in another episode at some point. But what can happen with water getting underneath homes and especially slabs. So we might discuss that at a later stage. There is still so much more we can talk about there, but let's leave some of that for another episode. We'll come back to that. We'll do a circle. So what I'd like to talk about now is what happens if there is damage to a home during construction. Touched on it a little bit before, but we'll touch on it now in a big way. So now, of course, we can talk about builder's responsibility during build if there is damage. So builder's responsibility is having insurance and making sure that if, God forbid, anything does happen, like let's just say a huge tree falls on the house during a storm, or flooding washes away part of the home, God forbid that could ever happen. I couldn't imagine anything like that happening, but right now we're going to talk about it and see what happens. So when it comes to it, builder's responsibility during the build is to have the insurance, and you've got to make sure that the damage does get rectified. Obviously that needs to be quantified with whoever the insurer would be. So this is where the contract works insurance, God forbid if the builder was to go bust during that period, which we're seeing a lot of things like that happening at the moment. What are we meant to do and who are we meant to turn to? So instantly it's looking at the insurance companies. Builder should be. A builder, generally speaking, with that contract works insurance will be able to fix things up pretty quickly. Anything can happen in that period. So it could become worse, the quantification of the damage. Who knows how far it could actually go, but we don't want to really sort of be sitting around thinking about that too much, because we know that there are things to mitigate that. Whether there is an act of God that comes in and demolishes things, I'd hate to see that sort of thing happen, but there are times where these sorts of things happen. I mean, of all things that have happened, and I've seen it on a construction site. I wasn't working there, thankfully, but anybody that lives in Melbourne might remember this. One of my lights has just turned off as well. So if you're watching the video, lighting probably just changed. This particular project at the corner of Middleborough Road and Burwood Highway, there was a apartment complex being built, and in this apartment complex, at this particular stage, they were just doing the very early lower stages. So this hadn't even gotten above ground level at Burwood Highway. And somebody had managed, of all things, to drive off of the actual road, somehow go through one of the barriers and the fencing and drive their car into where they were preparing to pour a concrete slab for one of the underground garages, car parks. Who was to be blamed for that? Well, obviously the person driving, and their insurance company was the one that had to pay it, and all the damage got done. They had to come in, do the rectification works before they could do the pour. A few flow-on effects came from that, so it can be certainly challenging. But insurances, like when it comes to most other floods, damage to homes, the insurance should come in and be able to rectify things. Doesn't mean it's going to be quick. There might be the flow-on effect of there being a delay on the build as well, which can extend the times out. Sadly, it's part of the process. Sometimes we just have to live with that. It doesn't make life easy. If this has brought up any questions for you, and I know I'm bringing up a few questions from myself, which I might have to touch on in future episodes. If it has brought up any questions, then send us an email at buildersoffice101@gmail.com, or you can get in contact with me directly through my company, New Realm Homes, and have a chat with me anytime. Happy to have a chat and work out if there's anything that we can talk about. If there's questions, we can bring them up, and who knows, might even bring you on the line and have a chat with you on the phone or on Zoom. All fun. So let's bring the episode home. Sorry, I'm starting to feel it at the end of the day. It's always fun. Yeah, I'm just looking through my little run sheet here, just making sure that I'm covering what I wanted to really cover for you and make this as valuable as possible. Because at the end of the day, I want everybody that is listening to get something out of each one of these episodes. Or if not, then at least let me know, because I'm happy to hear all the feedback, good or bad. So don't be shy in telling me what's going on. So bring this episode home. Let's go with an easy one, shall we? Without going into the details on contracts, what should I be prepared for with during standard construction period? Weather is an all-dependent thing. Weather can slow things down. I've got a mate that actually works up around Jindabyne, and they have issues with snow during winter, and I'm quite sure that there's a lot of builders out there that experience that as well. So it makes for fun. Do you really want to be building during the middle of winter? Does anyone want to be building during the middle of winter? It doesn't matter where you are. In the southern states, yes, we get some pretty horrific weather during winter, and it can slow things down. Should you be prepared for extra days? If you're looking at a contract with a builder, look at how many weather days they actually have in there. Looking at the time of year, should we be thinking, okay, during the summer months, we're not really going to be affected too badly, because a lot of the time it's a little bit warmer. We're not going to get affected by rain, and you could be affected by a few days of heat, and people leave site as soon as it hits 36 degrees. So it can happen. During winter, you want to allow a few more extra days. So if you've got a build that's going to be going over this course of 12 months, you're going to be hitting all the months of the year and all the seasons. So be prepared that if you are going through winter, add an extra few days on and really talk to them about what's going on for the weather during the winter months, because what we're seeing at the moment, everything's unpredictable. We just don't know. So we've just got to be as prepared as we possibly can for any eventuality. There's nothing wrong with that. Just do your best. Have a chat with your builder. Have a chat with yourself, what you sort of expect. Be reasonable with your time periods. Don't sit around and go, oh, look, it should be able to get done in a couple of days when it could possibly take 2 weeks. Think about that. Be reasonable about it all, and you shouldn't have too much of a problem. And having those quite frank discussions with whoever's going to be the one building your home is going to pay dividends in the long run. So then expectations aren't necessarily not going to be met by the people that are doing the build for you. Yeah, I just want to thank you again for joining me for another episode, and I'm looking forward to the next one, and we can bring you something else. If you need to get in touch and ask me a question, once again, it's the buildersoffice101@gmail.com. And if you're watching on YouTube, then you'll see me in another funky shirt. I'm going to be wearing them all the time, so if you are watching, get on these funky shirts. They're a bit of fun, and they're there for a good reason. They do say something on the back that says these are a conversation starter, so if it's a bit bright for you, come and ask me the question. I'll be able to point you in the right direction. It's been great talking to you, and I'm looking forward to bringing you the next episode next week. You guys have a great week. Stay pretty.